Hi guys. I've been looking into the convict voyage. Luxury cruise or hell on the high seas? Quantitative history can only measure quantifiable variables found in the archives. We can't measure how many convicts cried for home or how many convicts vomited over the side of the ship. What we can do is measure how many convicts died and therefore how likely you were to die on a voyage, which I would say is a very useful measure when planning your next trip. We've all heard of the First Fleet. The Second Fleet was pretty average. Overcrowding, poor provisions, nightmare. After this, the government said that every ship had to have a surgeon superintendent on board. From 1805, the surgeon superintendent outranked everybody else on the ship when it came to convicts' health. Health comes first. Masters were also given a bonus for landing their convicts in good health. Money comes. This focus on health drastically improved the situation, which is frankly amazing considering medicine at the time. Pre-antibiotics, pre-penicillin, pre-electrolyte icy poles. Stuck out on the high seas, there's really only so much that leeches and laudanum can do. See, doctors at the time thought that disease travels on bad smells, miasmas. Bacteria wasn't discovered until the late 19th century, but doctors at the time had worked out that if they kept everything clean and smelling nice, they could reduce disease. Cleaning convicts' quarters, airing out bedding, washing convicts' clothes, washing convicts themselves every other day. That was a lot back then. As far as we can tell, male and female convict ships had the same hygiene regimes on board. So what's going on those female ships to make it so much more dangerous for the women? Our data comes from the journals kept by the surgeon superintendents. Kind of like your teenage diary, if as a teenager you were a doctor on board a convict ship and had to keep track of who was sick and who died. Dear diary, someone had dysentery. We've taken data from these diaries plus everything we know about each transportation vessel to test different independent variables to see which ones had a significant effect on the dependent variable, mortality. How about the size of the ship? Did that have an effect? No. Age of the ship? The food they ate? No. What if they were already sick? Before transportation, male convicts worked on hulks, kind of like big houseboats that don't go anywhere. Big, overcrowded houseboats full of criminals. If a male convict turned up to be transported sick, they wouldn't let him sail to Australia. They'd just pop him back on the hulks and he'd either get better or die. But female convicts after sentencing were sent to regional prisons, and then often had quite long cross-country journeys to make it to the docks. We did find a relationship between distance travelled to reach the ship and mortality rates at sea. If by the time she reached the ship a woman was looking a little green around the gills, it was so much effort to have to send her back to a regional prison, so they'd often just let her board anyway. And if you board sick, you're probably going to stay sick, and you're going to make everybody else sick too. What about types of sickness? Dysentery is a hygiene-related disease, right? But if the surgeon superintendents had the same hygiene practices on both male and female ships, and there is no evidence that we didn't, then why are the women's ships more unhygienic than the men's? Babies. Babies. Those cute, cuddly harbingers of death. Female convicts often brought children with them who were too small to leave behind, or sometimes even gave birth on board the convict ship. If you've ever been stuck inside on a rainy day with a toddler, times that by a bajillion. Crossing the rocky Southern Ocean, it'd be hard to keep your clothes and bedding dry on a good day, let alone with a baby below decks, in a storm, with only a couple of fabric nappies that you're using over and over again with limited fresh water for 4 months straight. Total nightmare. So next time you're planning a family cruise, maybe leave the kids at home. Also, that way you can go to the disco all night long. Just for some wider context, you might be interested to know, it was actually far safer to travel as a convict than it was to travel as a free migrant. I guess free migrants weren't forced to follow the same hygiene measures as convicts. In my opinion, you should wash your hair. I'll do what I want. Van Diemen's Land won't take any more Irish convicts. Mate, this is a farm.